I'd like to call the Butte-Silver Council of Commissioners regular meeting for Wednesday, October 4th, 2023 to order. Clerk, can we please have a roll call?
10 present, 2 absent.
10 present, 2 absent. Please note that Commissioner Anderson and Commissioner Frederickson are excused from tonight's meeting. Commissioner Sorge, could you lead us in the prayer and the pledge?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, fellow commissioners. Almighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which will greatly affect our community of Butte-Silver. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll move to the approval of the minutes. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I would make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 2023 regular meeting and the September 27th, 2023 special meeting.
We have a motion and a second. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay. Motion passes. Moving on, we do not have any items, I believe, that are not addressed on the agenda tonight. So we'll move on to the Chief Executive's report. Some positive announcements recently in Butte-Silver. Civic Center Road is now open to the delight of the public and the cut across that goes through there. And I know to the delight of Mr. Melvin, as he's been waiting diligently to see that open and for the parking to be ready to go for our upcoming events. And so we thank everybody for their sacrifice during the time of that being closed and working through the cleanup that turned out to be a fantastic project. Today I went to the Finland for a ribbon cutting of the new mural up on the Finland on the motor inn that Peregrine Heathcote did up there. And if you haven't seen that mural, it's fantastic, and it speaks to the goal of having a public arts committee. I just realized today that we have 6 new pieces of art that are throughout Uptown Butte. Another beautiful piece of art was done by Frankie Hall down on Front in Utah. It amazes me what he did with spray paint on the side of that building, and it just enhances everything that we're doing here in Butte, and it speaks to the work that's being done with the Uptown Master Plan, the zoning changes, the housing plan, the Parks Master Plan, all the different things that we're working to that are improving Butte every day. And so we've got fantastic citizens and staff that are working on that. Big announcement, Tech Western game. If anyone knows me, this is a house divided or a guy divided right here because I played at Western. I'm on the Tech Digger Athletic Association board, and this is what a fantastic weekend for our community as the kids from Dillon come down and play here at Tech, and it's going to be a beautiful day, and so excited to do that. The girls are playing currently up at Montana Tech. The volleyball team's playing against Western, so it's a Tech Western weekend, so excited for that. I heard a quote from Coach Green last week when we had Ryan Lance, all the activities around that, and he said, between Ryan Lance and myself, we've donated just over $31 million to Montana Tech. So, so that's exciting. Other things have gone on. Last week we had the Mako conference here in town, a lot of activities and talks about things that we're going to talk about here tonight that will be addressed. I'm not going to touch on that right now because there'll be plenty of conversation as we go through this. And then next week I'll be attending the Montana League of Cities and Towns, which I'm on the board of directors of that. And the representation of knowing the differences and everything that goes on between counties and cities and things like that. It's imperative to remain active and engaged in those two organizations. Other things that happened, Stoughton Park is ahead of schedule on the playground. I was talking to Bob Lazary, and he stated that he thinks that the playground may be up and ready to go by the end of next week. Kids will be able to be back on that playground, playing on it again next week. The Lexington Wetlands Project is going on. That's a great thing for our community as well, for wildlife, bird watching, and just a really nice conservation area that Butte can really be proud of. That we're working together with the Atlantic Richfield. It is not part of the Superfund cleanup. This is a project that was agreed upon between the Butte-Silver and Atlantic Richfield to do down in that Lexington Wetlands area. So that's a fantastic project as well. And it'll be a classroom for CFWEP and the schools and everything for them to be able to go down there. And we have really a fantastic area down there. I know we have a pretty full agenda tonight, so I'm going to close the Chief Executive's report and move on to any public comment on any item that is on the agenda tonight. If you'd like to speak to any item, please step forward, state your name, your address, and the item that you would like to speak about today. And we're going to limit everybody to 3 minutes like we always do in here to make sure that we keep the meeting moving.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chief Executive, members of the council, my name is Evan Barrett. I live at 807 West Silver in Butte. I'm not here to talk about Superfund. I'm here to talk about a problem that you're taking up tonight, which is Council Resolution 55 on the homeowner property tax relief. You know, I'm not here to tell you how you should vote or suggest how you should vote. You've been given a Hobson's choice. Whatever you do, you're going to have a bunch of people mad at you. You've been painted into a corner by the governor and his GOP supermajority, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why, because I've been deeply involved in the research that kind of uncovered this mess that they took care of. They initially, of course, as you know, tried to blame this extraordinary property tax increase on homeowners on local government, which was, you know, we know in no way was that even close to real. Your slice of the additional, there's $200 million added to the tax bills of homeowners in Montana this year, and that's a permanent rate increase for now. Unless they change something, that's permanently there over the next 5 years. The end of this term and the next 4 years of a governor's term, that's $1 billion on the backs of homeowners. And that all came by the simple act of them not doing what every other legislature before them did, which is to lower the rates. You can only lower mills. Mills affect everybody. When you lower the mills for homes in Butte, you're lowering the mills for industry in Butte, all across the state the same way. Rates can only be lowered by the legislature. The Revenue Department told the legislature, lower the rate, because of the appraisals are high, lower the rates from 1.35% to 0.94%. That simple act in a two-page bill, 3 number changes in a 2-page bill, there'd have been no problem in Montana at all. There'd have been no tax homeowner rate increase. You'd have gone about your business like you do every 2 years after the legislature meets and you set your levies. But that wasn't good enough. They had to do something smarter. I haven't figured out why they wanted to do it, but they did. Remember, 2 iron laws of property taxes. If appraisals go sky high, you've got to reduce the rates to neutralize the thing. The other iron law of property taxes is when you do levies, you affect everyone, meaning the big winners are the big taxpayers. Example, I'll give you this and then I'll get out of here and listen for what you have to say. But when you go down 17 mills as discussed tonight, what you end up having is that homeowners will save $830,000 in this county. Industry will save $1.1 million in this county by it going down. I see my time is up. I wish you well in your deliberations. I'll stay around.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak about any item on the agenda tonight? Please state your name, address, and the item that you would like to speak about.
It's on. Auditor Banner, 2601 Grand Avenue. Communication 14, 2023-500. Requesting a reestablishment of the playground and park in the Greeley neighborhood. Just a little history on the land. The land was originally donated as parkland back in the 1800s. A school was built and functioned for many years. When the school closed, the parkland and the building were sold cheap. The city had to transfer the parkland to the school district so they could sell it. The Greeley neighborhood advocated for the new owner to build or to convert it into apartments. He wasn't able to find the financing, I guess, so he rented it out to a pot farmer. When the neighborhood objected, he tore the building down. We only need a few lots next to the air monitor system. I do hope you will reconsider Communication 14, number 2023-500, and refer it to your Parks and Rec Department and/or Planning for future study and a report back to this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderhoff. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward, state your name, address, and the item you'd like to speak on?
I posted this. I'm Larry Winstall. Do you want to hear it now, or should I wait till it comes around?
So it depends on if it's segregated or not, whether you'd be able to speak on it. You can speak to it right now if you would like.
The reason I posted it as a communication was because I wanted to get a conversation about it. You know, I didn't just want to come up here and just, so I guess I'll go ahead with it. Everything Ed said, it's plotted. You can look at these old maps as Silverbow Park, and you see the streets around it: Park Place East, Park Place South, North. It's in an ideal location for an open space, a playground, a green space. Right now, it's the main blighted space in our neighborhood. The school board practically gave this away for $2,500, and it was a real pain. I was driving a truck on the road. I wasn't notified about it. So, like Ed said, Ingram's had it, and they've tried to do something with it and wound up demolishing it. The current owner is in Whitehall. Wagner Bean, LLC. The property card on it is not very accurate. They list it as 100,624 square feet, and I'm sure it's many times that size. We haven't had, I've lived here 17 years, and we haven't had any improvements in our neighborhood. We have some problems with that stormwater project, and I won't go into it right now, but it needs to be evaluated. So back to the playground, we've been desiring to get control of the space for 10 years since, you know, it was closed. We've had interest from the Kiwanis, and I've got kind of a verbal commitment from the mine for some money to develop it. And Ed and I are part of a nonprofit, the GNCDC, and we do get grant money, and we can get grant money to develop this. What we cannot do is get the property back. Nothing's being done with it now. I don't know if you've driven to the Greeley neighborhood recently. With the shortage of housing, there's a great interest in our neighborhood. A lot of these bungalows are being completely remodeled. There are kids in our neighborhood. I see them, they've got nowhere to go. The lots are very small. We do have mobile homes, and they're crammed full of toys, playground stuff. There's a daycare center right across the street from it. So I'm quite sure it'd be useful as a playground, a community garden, a green space. It would definitely give an uplift to our neighborhood. And it's a really good place for a playground because unlike some of these other playgrounds, you don't have to, you can walk to it. You know, like Stodden's really nice, but how are the kids gonna get there? Or McGruff, that's kind of an industrial area.
Thank you, Mr. Winstall. Your 3 minutes is up, and it may get segregated where you might be able to speak some more. So at that time, if it gets segregated, they could pull you up there at that time. Okay.
I have contacted the various departments on this previously, and I've gotten no response. So this is another reason why I put it on the agenda.
You can tell.
I really think you should give this serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winstall. Do we have anyone else who would like to come forward? State your name, address, and...
Hello, Mr. Chief Executive and Commissioners. My name is Tom Pelletier. I'm here basically with some good news, and that is there's a new program in town that Easter Seals Goodwill is sponsoring. It's a grant that is the funding is coming from the U.S. Department of Labor, and it has two main goals in mind for Butte-Silver. It's a statewide grant. It's actually available for every state. The funds are available in every state. The Department of Labor has identified that seniors 55 and older could use a little extra money. And so there's a program that we have going on in Butte that anyone 55 and over that would like to volunteer anywhere for a nonprofit organization can make $9.95 an hour for their volunteer hours, up to 29 hours. And the agencies involved that we have so far are, it started off last year with the Belmont Center, the Senior Center, the Food Bank, Butte Central, Habitat for Humanity, the Butte-Silver Affordable Housing Group, Butte Sheltered Workshop Thrift Store, the Goodwill Thrift Store, and myself, I'm at the Butte Library. So I work for Steph Johnson, free of charge to the library. The Easter Seals Goodwill pays my salary and taxes and my workers' comp. And so there's no cost to Butte-Silver Bow whatsoever. That's why I say it's a bit of good news. We have a program and we have funding to put seniors to work that could use an extra few hundred to $1,000 a month for volunteering in these great organizations in Butte. And the second benefit to our community is that organizations that I mentioned get a free employee. And you know, everybody can use a little more manpower. I've talked to the archives, they're interested. I've talked to Bill Melvin, Butte Civic Center's interested. I've talked to the animal shelter, they're interested. As you know, everybody could use some extra help. And so it's a way of getting people out of their house and in the community that are willing to work and they still would like to work. And they can make some extra money and help out where they can help out. So thank you for your time, and I hope you all agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pelletier. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak to any item on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, I'm going to make a change to the agenda, and we're going to move Section 3 in front of Section 1 tonight. And so Section 3 is communications to be read and acted upon. Number one, communication number 2023-496, JP Gallagher, Chief Executive, requesting Council of Commissioners concurrence in the appointment of Julia Crane, 275 Roosevelt Drive, Butte, Montana, 59701, to be the new Butte-Silver Planning Director. Ms. Crane, you could come forward, but if you like. We put the job out for it to be advertised to the outside of Butte and internally, and we got a few resumes and applications back, and we are blessed to have a fantastic applicant that has been kind of raised in Butte-Silver government, in the archives by her mother, worked in the planning department, went to school for planning, and has just an incredible background, and has had an administrative role in our Superfund department as the assistant director. And so we're very blessed to have her as the recommendation from the chief executive to this. So before we let you speak, we've got to have a motion. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. It is my honor to make a motion to concur with communication number 2023-496 to appoint Julia Crane as the new planning director and place this communication on file.
We have a motion and a second to concur and place on file communication number 2023-496. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay. Motion passes. So Julia, I'd like for you to say a few words, but I just want to say in respect to working with Julia over the last few years here, previously as Parks and Rec Director and currently as the Chief Executive, I've got to see Julia's talents, her leadership, her ability to organize and unite and work together collaboratively in our community makes her undeniably the best candidate we could have possibly had. So with that, Julia, please introduce yourself.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Vice Chair Shea, Commissioners, thank you so much. I am a little emotional, I have to admit that. I'm bringing a tremendous amount of passion for this community to this job. It was about 15 years ago that I started making the decision of whether how I wanted to move forward in my life and what career path I wanted to choose. And I made a big investment in graduate school in urban and regional planning. And in my interview with the interview committee, I talked about the statements that I had written to the schools that I applied to about what I hoped for professionally in my life. And it is going to be a tremendous honor to serve this public and to help lead this government forward, to create so much possibility and potential for each of us and our families. And I really thank you all, and I'm very excited to work with each and every one of you to do really great things for your districts and Butte as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Julia, I think I'm a little bit emotional, frankly. I think that, to see all you've already given to our community, I know that the Reclamation Department's going to miss you greatly, but to see what you've already given and understand your passion for Butte-Silver and for your people here in Butte-Silver, I don't think that there's a better person for this job. And it does make me emotional to see your little girl sitting over there watching you be able to accept this position. So congratulations, and I look forward to working with you as well.
Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. When I think of Julia, the word that comes to mind for me is steady. Julia is always steady. She doesn't get too excited. She's always looking for solutions. She's very level-headed and very logical. And I really appreciate that approach because sometimes I'm not any of those things. So I really think Butte-Silver Bow got this right, 110% right. Congratulations.
All right. Well, Julia, go out with your family, celebrate right now. Congratulations and welcome to the Butte-Silver Bow Planning Department. All right, now back to the hard business. Moving to section 1, bid openings, public hearings, and presentations and/or petitions. We have one bid opening tonight. Communication number 2023-480. Bill Melvin, Civic Center Manager, requesting Council of Commissioners concurrence to schedule a bid opening for October 4th, 2023, regular meeting agenda for a bid opening for the replacement of bleachers at the Butte Civic Center. Mr. Melvin. Oh, do we have, do we have proof of publication?
Mr. Chief Executive, we do have proof of publication, and it does appear to be in order.
Thank you, County Attorney Joyce. Now, Mr. Melvin, thank you.
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioners, we did receive one bid from Tut Construction of Billings, Montana. There's the bid bond.
And Mr. Chief Executive, there is a bid bond in the amount of 10% from a licensed surety company that does appear to be in order.
Thank you, County Attorney Joyce.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Mr. Chief Executive, excuse me, the bid reads as $315,862 and no cents. $315,862 and no cents.
That's $315,827.
827, I'm sorry.
827. Okay. So
315,827. It's on their bid. They have it different in their written as they do in the.
So with
the
that,
bid shows 327. The other one shows 362. That's a typo, I guess. We'll take the 27.
I'll take the 27. All right. Okay.
315,827. If I may, Mr. Chief Executive, the good news on that is that the production, King Street Productions, which is 1923, has applied $200,000 to this purchase due to the fact that they ruined our old ones.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Melvin. So, Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Thank you, Mr. Melvin. At this time, I would make a motion to refer the bids back to the Civic Center staff and the Chief Executive for their recommendation.
We have a motion and a second to refer back to the Civic Center and Chief Executive. Is there anything on the question? Commissioner Fortune.
Mr. Melvin, what happens with the old bleachers? Can you sell them, or are they just too far gone? Or?
Commissioner Fortune, Mr. Melvin.
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Fortune, that's a great question. In the original bid, they had $20,000 to dismantle and get rid of the old bleachers, and we thought we would hang on to them ourselves and do that project in-house. But that's a great question, Justin. I have been approached about using them. In the past, we have given old bleachers to different entities. One that sticks in my mind is the Youth Challenge over in Dillon. Took some of our bleachers. So that'll have to be something that we'll look at. These bleachers were in pretty tough shape. What happened was the movie company pulled them out of the building and they busted them up pretty bad, and we had to have this construction company come in and fix them for us. They told us they were not gonna be moved again because they wouldn't be safe. So we pretty much had to keep the old ones in place. But working with the county attorney and other entities, we might be able to transfer them to a nonprofit or somebody else, should they want them. But that's a great question, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Melvin. Any other questions? So we have a motion and a second. Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Melvin. It's just been a good day for him today. He's got Civic Center Road open, he's got new bleachers. He's a happy guy. Next, we'll move on to petitions. We have one petition, petition number 2023-01. David Gary, Butte-Silver Bowl Lands Record Coordinator, has a petition that was filed with the Lands Record Office to close and vacate for a platted and undeveloped portion of Discovery Drive located in Section 25, Township 03, North Range 08, West Principal Meridian, Montana, Butte-Silver Bowl, City, County, Montana. The right-of-way is adjacent to the Lot 7 of the Copper City Parks Subdivision Phase 1, Plat 264-B, and Lot 6 of the amended plat of the Copper Peak Subdivision Phase 1. There's certificate of survey 1078B-RB. So, Mr. Aguirre.
Thanks, Mr. Chief Executive, members of council. For the record, David Gary, Land Records Coordinator. And this is the initial communication to get the process started for this petition. And I guess at this time, we'd just be requesting that you refer it to the Public Works Committee to review and set a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Aguirre. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Aguirre. At this time, I would make a motion to refer petition number 2023-01 to the Public Works Committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to refer petition number 2023-01 to the Public Works Committee. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to section 2, consent agenda, A1 through 4 and B1 through 17. Do we have any friendly amendments and or segregations? Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I would like to segregate item number 7, communication number 2023-492.
That's item 7, communication number 2023-492. Commissioner Sorich and then Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'd like to segregate number 14, 2023-500.
That's item 14, communication number 2023-500. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I would like to segregate number 15, 2023-501.
Item 15, communication number 2023-501. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I would like to segregate number 3, communication number 2023-488.
That's item 3, communication number 2023-488. Do we have any more friendly amendments and or segregations? Seeing none, Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda, Section A, committee reports, items 1 through 4, with the exception of item number 3, communication number 2023-488, number 7, communication number 2023-492, number 14, communication number 2023-500, and number 15, communication number 2023-501.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve tonight's consent agenda. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving to item number 3, communication number 2023-488, JP Gallagher, Chief Executive, requesting Council Commissioners review and authorize the Chief Executive to sign the Action Inc. Fiscal Year 2024 Butte-Silver Bow Assistance Program Agreement. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Obviously, I have no issues with this communication. I just want to take this minute, I guess. I see Ms. Second back there, but I think it's always important to recognize truly what Action Inc. does for our community. And I think in the state of urban camping, I guess is what they're calling it now, and the many issues that are going on across the state of Montana, I just want to express how fortunate we are to have Action Inc. to help us at least mitigate those circumstances just a little bit. So thank you very much for what you guys do. And with that, I will make a motion to concur and place on file communication number 2023-488.
Second.
We have a motion and a second taking communication 2023-488 to concur and place on file. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to item number 7, communication number 2023-492, Linda Sazer Joyce, Clerk and Recorder, requesting Council Commissioners authorization to approve the draft resolution for the precinct boundaries and ordinance for commission boundaries. These are products of the state redistricting that were approved in March. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I segregated this to change the recommendation from concur and place on file to note and place on file because the resolution and the ordinance are already on the agenda later in the agenda to be referred to the judiciary. So this will clear this item from the agenda. It will be discussed in judiciary and brought forward from there. So with that, I'll make a motion to note and place on file communication number 2023-492.
We have a motion and a second to note and place on file communication number 2023-492. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to item number 14, communication number 2023-500, Larry Wenzel, GNCDC, requesting Council of Commissioners to discuss the former Greeley school grounds and develop an open green space and playground. Commissioner Sorge.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, fellow commissioners. The reason I segregated this, well, the motion was to note and place on file. The reason I segregated it was just to maybe give a real brief word on why it was to be noted and placed on file. First off, I don't disagree with them that the Greeley area needs some green space. And I don't disagree with them that the old Greeley school here is a mess. It really does need to be cleaned up. But Butte-Silver Bow doesn't own the property. You know, it's privately held. It's privately owned. It has been for years. I think we're real premature, or I think it would be pretty hard for us to discuss anything where we don't own the property. You know, how are we going to how are we going to talk about building a park if we don't have the land? I'm not saying that, you know, there is no property in that neck of the woods that is part of the master park plan. I think that needs to be changed. I think there's some good discussions we have to be, but at this point, not owning that property, I don't think we can really even talk about doing this. So at this time, I'm still going to make the motion, note and place on file, and hopefully we can work with the Director of Parks and Rec and the Chief Executive to move forward to amend the park plan to find some properties around the north side of the Greeley School, the north side of Grand Avenue. That's a motion to note and place on file.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there anything on the question? Commissioner Callahan.
I just thought we should give the
Okay, so doesn't matter which order you want to go in. Okay, Mr. Vanderup, welcome to the podium.
Left out of my previous presentation that the previous owner, I'm not sure who owns the property right now, but the previous owner tore down the building, saving Butte-Silver Bowl tens of thousands of dollars. So I really feel that Butte-Silver Bowl ought to consider putting in a few thousand just to buy back a few lots in that property. I agree they don't own it now, but I think it could be purchased, and it needs to be thought about, and it needs to be referred to our Parks and Rec and Planning Department, because I do believe in the 2010 Greeley Neighborhood Plan, there is a park.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderup. Mr. Winstill, would you like to come up and make any more statements?
Our communication, not this specific one, but we did specifically request repurchase of the Greeley School playground. And if you read the state code under urban renewal, it mentions things like parks, playgrounds, demolition, acquisition of land are all legitimate functions of urban renewal. So I think this is, they're not making any more land. And we just like to do something nice for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winstill. Commissioner Thatcher and then Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Mr. Winstill, just really quick, when you say you made a communication to purchase the land, did I hear that correctly? Really quick, did I?
Commissioner Thatcher, Mr. Winstill.
I didn't quite hear.
When you were just up here speaking, did you make a comment about you made a communication to purchase the land?
Yes, there's on the website, I did forward the communication to the various departments, the planning department, the park department, a general communication other than this one. I also walked the entire neighborhood and handed out cards, little green cards, I don't know if you've seen those, that we got a lot of response and a lot of favorable support for this.
Okay. Follow up, Commissioner Thatcher and then Commissioner Shea. Sorry.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. So the communication was for Butte-Silver Bow to purchase the land. That's what you're in favor of, not your group, the GNCDC.
Commissioner Thatcher and Mr. Winstill, go ahead.
I believe it should be public property. We don't have the funds to buy it, and it's for public use. But as a community nonprofit, we could fund the improvements of it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Winstill. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, and Mr. Winstill, don't sit down yet. As Commissioner Sorich said, and this is his district, and I do agree with him that, and I agree with you and Mr. Vanderob that there needs to be some parkland there. One of the things about buying property from private entities is that the property needs to be for sale. Have you spoken with the owners of the property to see if they're willing to sell it?
Commissioner Shea, Mr. Winstill, go ahead.
I don't have the authority of eminent domain, or do I have the authority to make an offer? But I think, I don't know who would do this, the park department, the planning department, who would look into this?
Mr. Winstill, I can speak to this. I don't think that acquiring a property like this, that we would ever do this through eminent domain. We would want to purchase it, on a sale if that was the process. That's, I can speak for just what my recommendation would be, but I think we need to find out if the owners would be willing to sell the park. Commissioner Shea, you want to follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. That's exactly right. I understand that you don't personally, have the authority or maybe the funding or the nonprofit to purchase the property. I was just wondering, just as a matter of being neighbors with the property, if anybody, maybe Mr. Vanderob has actually spoken to the owner and kind of weigh felt them out to see if they were interested in selling, because as you know, the county's not really in the business of buying property unless it falls into our hands by some other unfortunate circumstance. Not to say that we wouldn't be able to do something like this, but it takes more than just the want of the neighbors.
Can we,
Commissioner Shea, Mr. Winslow, go ahead.
should we contact the owner as a community nonprofit and get that information for you?
Mr. Winslow, I think, yeah, I think the, kind of looking at this body, that's they're asking.
Then, if I can get some kind of a opinion on whether they want to sell it, I hope we could move forward with a full discussion of it.
Mr. Winslow, I think that could be discussed if we knew that the property owner possibly was. I think that would open it up a little differently. Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I was just wondering, maybe if you contacted the property owner, seeing that he got such a good deal on it, see if he might donate some of that land if he knows it's going to a park for the kids of the neighborhood. It wouldn't be hurt to give it a shot anyway.
Commissioner Callahan, Mr. Winslow. I believe it's changed hands since that original purchase from the school district happened. So, okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Winslow.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you for your time.
Okay. Commissioner Thatcher, you have one more question. Is it for Mr. Winslow? Okay. Sorry.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Just a point of procedure. So if you do, we're going to vote to place this on file. If you do go speak to the current landowners, you will have to come back with a new communication.
Absolutely.
Okay, just so you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thatcher. Thank you, Mr. Winslow. All right, moving on. Oh yeah, we need a vote. So this was Commissioner Sorich. We need, could commissioners please vote? We already had the motion in a second. Yep. And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay. Motion passes. Moving on to item number 15, communication number 2023-501. JP Gallagher, Chief Executive, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to have the Chief Executive sign the agreement with the Communication Management Service LLC for the effective date, the scope of the work, and the payment for Butte-Silver boat. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I believe this is an amendment to something we put $60,000 up to earlier this year. Is that correct?
That contract ended, and when we at our last vote, Commissioner Fisher, we kind of agreed that this was going to have to continue due to the fact that we didn't come to a resolution or conclusion with that. So this is an extension of those services through, I believe, July 1 of 2024. What? It was a 3-1? Oh, March 1st, 2024. Oh, thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive, once again. So I think what they're asking for is another $13,250 up to $15,850 added. Is that correct?
I believe it's 13,000 to 15,000 is the variable that could be in there.
Well, it says here, department head meetings, 1,000, reevaluate identified positions based on 40 positions, $5,000, develop management reconsideration process, $500, pay plan rules, $500, presentations based on 3 presentations, $1,500, communication, $750, implementation spreadsheet, $3,000, and travel based on 3 trips, $1,000, total of $13,250. Then down below here it says, this proposal is not to exceed $15,800 without prior authorization from Silver County. I guess what I'm saying is, if we already paid these guys $60,000, and we've already had increases, in our budget that we approved here a while back, what are we studying here? I understand, you and I spoke about this before, but if $60,000 didn't cover what we wanted to find out, what makes us think that another $13,250 or up to $15,850 is going to make this happen?
Commissioner Fisher, I think there was a request that we needed to go back and have some more input with some of the departments and the positions that were there, and it was a request of this body to make sure that we complete this and provide a product that the commission is fully, not saying supportive of, but is fully aware of the pay structure that is being presented in front of them, and that all of the positions are fairly evaluated as if we're looking to move this forward. Commissioner Fisher, follow up.
Thank you once again, Chief Executive. I guess my problem is I just, we're making changes in wages, and we had department change in the budget, where some people got $20,000 a year raise and some people got a 4% raise. And I just don't understand why we're having this company study all of this wage stuff when we're doing it anyhow. I mean, we're doing it. So what my fear is going to happen come out of this, just like a lot of studies, is what's going to happen here is they're coming back and say there's a lot of people underpaid and we're going to be under budget, as you can see further in the agenda tonight, with the mills that we're talking about. I just don't know where we're going with this. It seems to me like the 60,000 was ample amount to study this and find out what's going on. It seems like they keep coming back, and who knows, next time they don't come back for another 13,000. I mean, we're going up to $73,250 now. That'd pay a lot of wages in Butte-Silver County without doing a study. I mean, $73,250 would pay a lot of people a lot of money without having these people paid to just study it. I mean, reevaluate identified position based on 40 position, $5,000. Implement spreadsheet, $3,000. I mean, I just don't know if I agree with this, so I'm looking for other input. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Shea, and then Commissioner Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'm not quite sure where to start, but so this is a really important thing for Butte-Silver Bow. The prior pay plan was repealed by this governing body. I don't know that any of us were here, maybe one or two. And it's crucial for employers, even local government employers, to know that their wages are competitive with the market around them. It's crucial to know if you have inadvertent wage gaps that affect people who are in protected classes. This is the way we find those things out. We have people come in who are professionals. They do the wage studies. They coach us. They help us implement a wage plan. And from there, the Human Resources Director will be tasked with maintaining it. Her department will reach out to those comparable agencies and check their wages and compare with cost of living and ensure that wages are kept fair and they're kept in line with the market that the Butte-Silver Bow government is competing with the same workforce as. So as a recruiter myself in my private employment, that is the biggest reason that people turn down positions right now, because they can go somewhere else and make more money. That's the reality of it. It's very crucial that we have the best workforce, that we pay them well, and we want them to stay, because the institutional knowledge within this organization is also very important and contributes to the success of the local government.
Thank you, Commissioner Shea. Commissioner Reardon.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I remember when we dealt with this the first time and all that, and correct me if I'm wrong, basically what the people around this table talked about is the retention of employees for Butte-Silver Bow. Basically because of the payment to certain clerks and the lower positions and the entry positions, we've become more or less a training center. And I think that it's important. I think you all know me too also, is I'm not a big study guy. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. But the thing about it is I don't think we can lose focus. I agree with Commissioner Shea, but the biggest thing is that the employees, union representatives, and all that stuff probably is the best show in Montana. What we have to do is we have to treat the people that are coming into these positions, especially into the courthouse scenario, and retain these employees and hire them at a decent wage, so we can make these departments, solidify these departments, rather than going through certain employees over a time period. And I think, I agree, $60,000 is, those guys were here and all that, and it might be, but I think it's something that whether we vote on this, whether we agree to it, is the fact that we really got to look at the original intention is to keep good people working for Butte-Silver Bowl once they're hired in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reardon. Commissioner Thatcher, and I'm sorry, it's Commissioner Reardon, not Mr. Reardon, sorry. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I think, too, from my understanding, part of the reason why we extended this was because the rollout wasn't necessarily happening in the best ways possible. I think that there wasn't necessarily great communication within the department heads and below them regarding the pay study and regarding different structures. And so I think that that's also part of this extension. Commissioner Fisher, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thatcher. Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I would have to agree with, I think everybody's missing the point with Commissioner Fisher is saying. We agreed with the 60,000, it's just the extension. We're not saying that we don't want good people to stay here and pay them the right wage, that we've already given out 60,000 that should have been taken care of through the 60,000 that we did prior. Now we want an extension of it. It just seems like it continues to go on. We're not saying that we don't want people to be here or we don't want people to stay here and to see the equability between other departments in a different county. We just don't want to continue to see another survey going up and up and up.
Thank you, Commissioner Mankins. Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I totally agree with that. Jim and Eric both have right on. I mean, nobody on this council's against people having a fair wage and doing the right thing for our employees. I believe when we have bid openings down here, you know, people put a price up there, and I believe this company gave you a price to start with. If they didn't implement their thing properly, is that on them, or do we have to just keep paying them until they get it right? I agree with these folks that we shouldn't keep giving them more money just because they didn't get the end result they wanted.
Commissioner Callahan, I'll speak to that just a little bit, is that we did have a contract that had a set date at the end, and as we were trying to meet that date, we saw some obstacles that we had that part of the communication with department heads, communication with the council, and it was pretty much agreed upon unanimously that we weren't ready to bring this pay structure forward to the council members till we had more input, and some of that was on us as the body trying to get this in place and trying to do it right. And I think that's more than anything else that we do is we've had a couple pay structures that have been brought forth to this body, one that was fully implemented for the most part and then struck or taken away. And so we want to make sure that if we're bringing something that it's a viable salary structure that can be a livable document that we can work with throughout. And so I think it's worth the investment, and I'll take some accountability to the extension of this. I was trying to make sure that we were going to get it done by July 1 so we could give the people some assurity that their wages would potentially go up. This was something that's been promised since the day I came in as the Parks and Rec Director that needs to be done. And so I'll take some accountability with that it wasn't completed at that time, but I think we don't want to abandon this and say, all right, the study's good and we're done, because then we'd have an incomplete study, and I fear that it would fall flat on its face. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I guess if we're being honest, I'll take some accountability with it too, because when CMS came to present what they had prepared to the Personnel Committee, of which I was a member, it was pretty obvious to me that they weren't quite all the way there with it. They didn't understand Butte-Silver Bow employees and Butte-Silver Bow taxpayers the way that we do. And I urged the Chief Executive to pull back and have them take a deeper look, because I think my exact words were, we have to get this right. There's no other option. And the only way we can get it right now is to not throw away the money we've already spent, but to see it through. But I would like to see the Chief Executive communicate with CMS that we want a finished product.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shea. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. When you eliminate the union employees and all the people there, how many people are we talking about that we're studying? It looks to me like it's all department heads and higher positions. We're not gonna help the clerks in the Treasury Department. We're not gonna help the clerks in Linda Sager's office. We're gonna help the higher echelon. You know, the trickle-down theory don't work. I'm not into this at all. I'm just telling you. The $60,000, and I remember Commissioner Shea and I both talked about this. When we first talked about this $60,000, we had to get it right. They assured us when they sat at that table that they're gonna get it right for $60,000. Now they come back with another 13.8. It's kinda like, to me, it's, you know, I don't know what you call it, bump and run or whatever, but they got us over the barrel right now. We have no choice. We gotta quit making deals like this. This is not good. They didn't do their job, and if we failed on our job, that's our job. But it wasn't me and the Personnel Committee or anybody else. If you failed, we failed. If they failed, they failed. But I mean, who knows they're gonna come back another time and say we need another. I mean, when you start looking at these numbers, $1,000 department head meetings, $1,000. I mean, you know, if you couldn't get your damn department heads together to have a meeting for $1,000, somebody failed. If you couldn't reevaluate positions, 40 positions for $5,000, 40 positions for $5,000. Add it up. That'd be a pretty good increase for them 40 people. If you divide 40 into 5,000, that'd be a pretty good increase. Pay plan rules, 500. Presentations based on 3 presentations, $500 a presentation. I don't get it. I mean, I don't want to make a motion to deny this because I see where you're at, and I agree with Commissioner Shea. And I just saying that, where does this stuff end when we keep going on like this? Every time someone does something with Silver Bow, just bid them low, and then we'll come back and get another add-on. It's happening all over the country. It's happening here, and I'm just getting pretty, you know, pretty conscious about this stuff. I just don't see $13,250 out of $60,000. That's quite a bit of a bump for someone come in to buy a car from me, and I bumped a $60,000 truck, told me another $13,000 to buy it. They'd walk out the door, and I think maybe we should start thinking about that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Shea.
Commissioner Fisher, I agree with you on, you know, there are lots of times that we see a lot of amendments where costs are added. I don't think that we can completely eliminate that, but I think we are getting better about anticipating those types of things and encouraging bids to be complete the first time. I do want to respond to your statement that most of the things that were discovered were that department heads were going to get raises. That's not true. I think I remember that we had a fair amount of employees that were, when we looked at this, not employees, positions that were being paid over market. Some are being paid under market. I know that my commitment and my goal would be to find the people and identify the people who are under market and do what we can within our budget constraints to get those people to market. Nobody really knows completely how it's all going to shake out. I don't disagree with your sentiment, and I want you to know that. So with that, I will make a motion to concur and place on file communication number 2023-501.
We have a motion and a second to concur and place on file communication number 2023-501. Is there anything else on the question? Commissioner Reardon.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Is it my understanding that with this contract and all that, these people will be present in the chambers to give us, I guess, a solution or what they come up with?
Commissioner Reardon, yes, the tasks that are on that will be on there, and those are meetings that will be presented in front of you as well as the department head meetings, and also with the personnel committee. So there's a number of things that will be done within that, and there is a deadline on this, and we will make sure that the CMS understands the task order at hand and the deadlines that are put in front of them. Thank you. Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. That's one thing I just wanted to clarify, that we're to July 31st, 2024. So hopefully between then and now, we're going to maybe hammer this out a few more times in there. We're not just going to show up here in July and then we're going to discuss this. I just hope that's
Commissioner O'Neill, that is correct, and I think I incorrectly said that it was July 1, but it is actually March 31st that they would have to have this complete. Oh, was it July 1? Oh, I thought you, July 31st. Oh, I thought you said March 31st. See, I need hearing aids as well. So July 31st. But yes, we'll have them present more times, to give an update of where we're at, and before we do the final presentation here. And we will make sure that we are working, Director Worm and myself, working with them to make sure that that is complete. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I'm having a tough time with this. I don't want to vote it down because we're already in 60,000. The $13,250 bump eats me raw. But I can't see throwing it out the window. But I'm just telling you, we got to quit making deals like this. We got to get what we bargained for. This is not the way consumers in America work. Everybody sees a government contract and they add on to it. That is BS to me, and we've got to quit doing this. And I'm telling you, you're the one that done the $60,000, and you sat and told us it was going to be done and complete. It wasn't.
Commissioner Fisher, I said right here, I say I take accountability for some of this.
So,
And
I
I
want to push the red button so bad, but I'm probably not going to because it's throwing out $60,000, but we got taken advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Anything else on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
8 yea, 2 nay.
8 yea, 2 nay, motion passes. Moving on to Section 3, communications to be read and acted upon. We have one I'm sorry, I already did that. Let's go on to Section 4, ordinances and resolutions introduced to judiciary. We have 4. Please note the ones that we are introducing to judiciary. And now we'll move on to Section 5, resolutions and ordinances for suspension of the rules for final passage. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. County Attorney Joyce, do you have the suspension of the rules language? I don't have it. Thank you.
You don't have that?
I don't have it memorized. I've never made the motion. I just panicked though, because I know right where it is. It's on my kitchen table. Okay. I move for the suspension of the rules for the purpose of considering Council Bill Resolution number 2023-55 by waiving subsection 7 of Rule 36 of the Rules and Order of Business of the Council of Commissioners, thereby having it considered for advanced passage without reference to the Judiciary Committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Is there anything on the question? Could commissioners please vote? And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
10 yea, 0 nay.
10 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving back to resolution number 2023-55, clerk, please read the caption.
A resolution repealing resolution number 2023-47 and revising the mandatory tax levies for the various funds of the state of Montana and fixing the rate to be raised by tax levy for each fund for fiscal year 2024 and providing for an effective date herein.
Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I believe there is about to be a very robust discussion on this subject. I would open up the floor to the commissioners to address their questions with our internal staff, with some of our members of the public are very well versed. There are members of the school district here that maybe would like to speak about this issue. Would anybody like to start?
Do any commissioners have any questions as we start? Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I have no questions. We're in a bad spot. we're either gonna get sued by the state or sued by the taxpayers, Butte-Silver both, so in my mind, I'll just go straight to the point. I'd rather get sued by the state than the taxpayers, because I work for the taxpayers, so that's kind of where I'm gonna go with it. And I think Danette has a little input on it, maybe, if she wants to visit. I talked to my brother, who's the county assessor today. He talked to Lori Baker. I think she's got a little bit to say about it. And as for the letter from the school district, which email we got today, I'm not sure how confused I was after that, but I'm looking for input from the professionals. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Director Gleason.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Fisher, Commissioners, I can't disagree with you at all that you're in a very difficult position. When we started this budget process, I think I told you it was probably, in my 30-year career in government, it was probably the most difficult. And we'd gone through bankruptcies at the last minute and had to pull wages and had to pull vacant positions and whatnot in the past, and this was the most difficult. For the record, I just want to reiterate again, I think this commission really did their job during the budget process. And to Evan's point, I think he was trying to make points here of how well this commission has handled this budget process. You not only reduce the number of mills, like Evan said, you had to reduce the number of mills to get to the same level of property taxes. You cut property taxes. You cut property taxes here by $3.5 million. So you reduced property taxes. You're not asking for the same level of payment here as what you got last year. You took and reduced property taxes. We sat at those Department of Revenue meetings. We sat side by side with the Department of Revenue, Chief Executive Gallagher, myself, the assessor, the treasurer. We attended those meetings and we heard the public. We heard little individual homeowners, all ages were there and present at those meetings and explaining to us that they were very scared of how they were going to afford their tax bills and how they were going to even be able to live in our community if the tax bills came to fruition the way that they thought they were going to come and how they were presented to them on their tax bills. We reassured them as a local government what we could do to help them. And the chief executive promised and was committed to try to reduce their tax bills as much as we could and to have little impact on them. I think what you're seeing before you was some of that was handed down from the legislature and from the governor's office, that some of these tax breaks didn't happen on these 95 mills. I'm not here to take a position. I'm just here to say that how this function works in 1510-420, I passed out to each one of you tonight. It starts, each one of these mills, the 33, the 22, the 1.5, we are one of the 6 communities in Montana that also have a VOTEC levy, and the 40 equalization mills all started out with the fact that you have to run a formula under 1510-420. That's the same calculation that I, as a local government, have to run, as well as any taxing jurisdiction besides the schools. They don't run the 1510-420 on their local levies. We run the 1510-420 levy calculation. And how that levy calculation works for us here is when you are levying, let's make it really simple. If you levy $1,000 1 year in property taxes, and let's say it's 10 mills, and next year the value goes way up like it did this year, in order to have the same number of 1,000, your mill levies drop. Evan was explaining that all to you. And that's kind of what happened, but the process when we first passed this original 2023-47 resolution, this council held the resolution. We had not received the letter from the state of Montana, from the Department of Revenue, telling us that they'd done any calculations, that have requested us to levy any of the mills. So we held that resolution, if you recall. We got the letter on around September 11th. Our mill levy card was late. I informed the Department of Revenue it would be late because we had not passed our resolution. So we went forward, you guys went forward with the 95 mills because we had the letter that said they made the calculation, and it said that you may, not shall, may levy up to 95 mills. And so we went forward under, as we always did in the past. We usually, by the way, receive those letters by around the 20th of August. We didn't receive it till after September 11th. It wasn't till last Wednesday that Chief Executive and I, as he expressed, were at a MACO conference, that we're even told or even had any privy to the information on the calculation. So I don't want you to think that I had these spreadsheets and I knew it was 77.9 in September or September 11th or even before that time. I did not know that. We don't look at the calculations of another entity. We don't look at the school district's calculations, and I don't tell like school district number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I don't like their calculations, and we send them back. We accept them. The county superintendent runs it through her processes with OPI. She gives us a spreadsheet. I develop the resolutions for them. The school district number 1 passes a resolution and sends it to us in the county superintendent of school, and then we levy those mills. Similar to what was always done here. Unfortunately, when the mills came up when we were notified last week, and we seen the spreadsheets and the calculations, and the mills come up significantly less than 95 mills, we felt it was an obligation, because you as commissioners, put in a really tough situation here, have to levy the taxes upon the taxpayers in your county. And I know County Attorney Joyce and I several times have looked a lot at some of these different statutes that relate to your functions and your role of having to do this, because it's very awkward. You have no control. You don't get to cut their budgets. You get to take no action, but you get to be the ones now put in this very tough, difficult situation where you're probably going to get potentially sued by one side or another, whichever way you go. I don't know what other information you want me to share with you. I think you have all been given the same information that I've been given, as well as Chief Executive Gallagher. I'm not sure if there's some questions you have related to our decision process or how we brought it forward to you, or calculations. I would be more than happy to try to help you.
Thank you, Director Gleason. I want to say this, last Wednesday, Director Gleason and myself, we stood up and challenged the calculations at the MACO conference, challenging how this would affect schools. And if you know anything about myself and Director Gleason, she's on the Butte Education Association board that works to raise money for the schools. I was a product of the schools as a teacher, as a principal, a school board member as well. We had to have assurances that the schools would not lose money over this time based on this for us. I'm not saying support it or not, but I would have got up here and fought tooth or nail if I thought that any money would be taken from the local schools over the next tax year and the following tax year. They had to prove it to us that this calculation, and that the state had sent out a calculation about 77.89 mils on this, that's what it would be assessed. That's what, following the 1510-420 formula, that's what they could formulate that out. It goes into the general budget. The state is obligated to fund the schools at the level that the schools have sent in. Now, I know that there's differing opinion here, and I've sent all of you different opinions here, and I'm not trying to influence you one way or the other. One is just like Commissioner Fisher said. On one hand, the state is probably going to sue the counties that allocate the 77.89 mils, and on the other hand, if we allocate the 95 mils and the 77.89 is proven to be the formula that was supposed to do, then we're going to have the local taxpayers suing us because we've overtaxed them. And we're the ones locally that set the tax card, that set the mills, not the state. We're the ones accountable for it. So that we've been put in a no-win situation here, not a place that I want to be. I never want to be sitting here having opposing views with anybody in the school district about this, but it's just putting that out there, what the options are for us here. So I know, Commissioner Thatcher, please.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Today has been a real treat as far as trying to get the most information. First, I want to start off, kind of echo your sentiment. I'm a public school kid. I would never, ever go against any sort of public funding towards our education system whatsoever. So that's why I feel like this has also been a major, I'm so confused issue for myself. I've done all the reading I feel like I maybe could. I guess, so just a couple things that I want everybody to consider, as far as I understand it, is like you said, school district budgets are set in statute, and so which the legislature can revisit in 2025. So with that being said, they still will receive the money that they have already been allocated within their budget. Is that correct, Director Gleason?
Commissioner Thatcher, Director Gleason.
Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Thatcher, Commissioners, no expert on school funding. As Chief Executive Gallagher stated, we both did a lot of digging into this. We stood up. It was a difficult conversation that we had to have with 400 other county commissioners at the MACO conference, stating that we were the first to say, yeah, no, we levied the 95 mills, and I'm saying, you know, we're not going to jeopardize or penalize schools. Just want to correct Chief Executive Gallagher, I'm no longer on the Butte Education Foundation.
Oh.
However, I was a founding
She was.
member of the Butte Education Foundation and served on that board for over 10 years after my children were out of the public schools education. So definitely a big supporter of public education. Sister just retired out of 30 years in public education, and I have a niece just starting her career in public education. So just want to make that clear, because there's been a few comments about my lack of support for public education. That is not true. I can tell you what I found, but I also think Kevin Patrick, the business manager from School District Number 1, is here, and he can maybe answer some of your questions too. But in our digging, we were told in House Bill 2 that was passed, the budget bill for the legislature, there's funding for the GTB, and that schools get a set dollar amount, and it's in there, it's funded. Now, just like us here, if your revenue, if they don't get the, you know, it's $80 million to the state, statewide, a change. If every county reduced its $80 million, it's $160 million over the 2-year period. But we've also been told, because here I go again, JP and I had this conversation with everyone in regards to this, and even in the handouts that you were giving that were, yes, some of them came from MACO, but they were presented and created by Department of Revenue, show over $800 million surplus. They can't say that they don't have enough money to cover a revenue shortfall to pay the schools and meet the obligations in their budget bill that they passed for 2 years. So they have the funding available. Is this probably going to impact changes? Because just like we talk about reserves up here all the time and the importance of them, over time, if you keep eating into reserves, yes. But what's going to happen to any of us in the next legislative session? We already know. We've seen what happened to us. We've seen the battles. Evan's over here. He battled with us side by side for local government. We've seen that this last legislative session. They took, you know, they were taking hits at our mills, taking hits at our property tax values, taking hits any which way that the legislature could to try to impact on local governments. Likewise, they did that same thing with schools, and it could happen again this legislative session. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think they're probably made whole. I'd rather Kevin talk on made whole means to them. But our understanding, what we've been told, and in some pretty, I feel very confident with the people that told us they are made whole for the next 2 years, and this would not impact them. They're more concerned about future years, which we all are. I'm concerned about what's going to happen with the local government in future years for our funding and our support and our entitlement payments and everything else that we get from the state as well. So I don't know if Kevin wants to come up with that.
Yeah, we'd like to welcome Mr. Patrick up, as he's the Finance and Budget Director for the Butte School District. Welcome, Mr. Patrick.
Thank you, Chief Executive, Commissioners, Danette. First off, just guess I'd like to say it's a pleasure working with Danette and Chief Executive. They reached out to us, kind of gave us a heads up on what was going on. But I'm just here to let you guys know, I guess, maybe answer some questions. But part of that 95 mills goes to something called guaranteed tax base. And that's a part of our base funding formula. And so that basically, the 95 mills goes to the county, or I mean the state, then we get that back in our funding formula, and that's used to directly reduce local taxes. So we're just afraid with this 95 mils, you know, have the $160 million over the 2 years, that's gonna have some effect on the GTB, which would directly affect what the school district is going to have to ask for mills to the public, which is potentially could raise their taxes. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, just to so you knew that part of our funding, because we are, like I think in my, most of you saw my email, of that 95 mils, we recoup about 90% of that comes back to the school districts, to the county for the county retirement fund, and all of that goes to help the school district, the county, reduce taxes on our local taxpayers. So with the shift of these mills and stuff, you could see a burden coming to your local taxpayers. I don't know if you guys have any other questions or.
Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Mr. Patrick, thank you for being here. I guess with your GTB, I understand a little bit about it. Obviously, you are much more privy to that. But even with that GTB, it's still going to have to go back to the 2025 legislation, at which point the Republican legislature would have to pass a property tax increase bill next session. Am I understanding that correctly? I mean, we don't know that this is going to affect the 2020, or this is going to affect taxpayers in 2025, because that's going to be could be a legislative issue in 2025.
Yeah, 2025.
Commissioner Thatcher, sorry, Mr. Patrick.
Sorry.
I just have to do procedure. So Commissioner Thatcher, Mr. Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, 2025 is an unknown. And when you come up, you know, with the 160 million going into the 25 session, yes, there's going to be some changes, and probably GTB is going to be where they go to look for that money, and that's going to directly affect schools. As far as this year, yeah, we probably won't have an effect. We should get our money unless, you know, like I think you guys said, the state says they have a surplus and they're going to use that money to fund the schools. If that's true, we'll be okay. If that's not true, then we could have a shortfall at the school district with some funding.
Follow up Commissioner Thatcher and then Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I guess based on state law, the state has to go into the general fund to give you that money if there is a shortfall, from my understanding. And so I don't think that it is in question at all that money may not show up this year, because as far as I understand, regardless, the schools are covered till 2025. So just really quick. So I guess the first source of revenue comes from state lands and stuff. And then, as far as I understand, just give me some time, then it comes from the equalization mills. Is that correct?
It's kind of hard
Okay,
to explain.
Commissioner Thatcher, Mr. Patrick.
Yeah, so, I mean, we have the 95 mills, I think, is that funds our direct state aid and our GTV. And that's what the 95 mills goes to fund. If that portion of revenue goes away or is reduced, then it will have a direct effect on our funding. And to speak to prior years, there was, I think, House Bill 587 that goes into effect next year, where they created a special revenue fund, and specifically next year, all the 95 mills is going to go into that fund. So this is the last year that you'll see this 95 mills going into the state general fund.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Follow up Commissioner Thatcher.
Okay, thank you for that. So that was going to be my next point, was that this money goes into the general fund, not directly, I guess, into the school districts, as I understand it. One quick question too is, did the Butte School District, and forgive me for not knowing this information, but did schools adjust down their mills this year? Because I believe you did. And so I guess if you guys are adjusting down mills and we're levying, city and county's levying less mills, I guess why doesn't the state have to levy less mills? I think that should be an important question, is why are the rest of us levying less and the state is expecting everybody else to be able to levy the 95 as they always have? Do you have an opinion on that, or?
Yeah, I can't answer to the state, but I know the school district did lower our mills. I do know that the school district's a little bit different than county government. We're set at a dollar amount. So we have a formula based off our A and B and an enrollment, which gives us a maximum budget amount. If right now we're operating at 100% max because the taxpayers of Butte were generous enough to vote that in. If that changes and that max goes up, then we have to go to the taxpayers and ask them for that increment to fund our budget at 100%. This 95 mills, it funds our base budget, and part of that base budget is some local tax dollars, but what offsets some of those local tax dollars is the GTB, that guaranteed tax-based aid. So we're just wanting to put out there that if that funding source goes away for our base budget, then the school district is going to have to ask the taxpayers to fund that portion of our budget in order for us to operate at our maximum budget. So, I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Follow-up, Commissioner Thatcher.
You're doing a great job. I don't mean to be putting you on the spot. I do have a question for Director Gleason, though, really quick.
Commissioner Thatcher, you have a question for Director Gleason?
Yeah. Director Gleason, could you just tell me about, like, options for tax collections?
Yeah, the treasurer and myself and the chief executive and the county attorney met just to kind of figure out some different plans, so you guys kind of have some options here. So, you know, and just to kind of tell you processes, what would happen more so than options, but the processes. So if you reduce the number of mills and we send out tax bills, we usually go to the printers around the 11th or 12th of October. The treasurer's here. Lori can give you more of an update of a schedule of how far out we can actually hold this till we have to go forward. But if we levy those mills and we get sued by the state, we still go forward what we're doing, but the state comes back, our lawsuit, that takes time usually, right? So if the lawsuit comes back and they say that the counties have erred and that we have to regenerate bills or rebill for those additional mills, we have the option to do that for the second half of taxes. So we would have to regenerate another tax bill and then send that back out and have that due in May. We're hoping that that could be an adjustment that would be an option if that happens. You know, if you go forward with the 95 mills, the chief executive and I, he can jump in here when I say this, but there was a lot of conversations about this as well. You go forward for the 95 mills, the counties are successful at the 77.9 mills plus our drop. Again, we're dropping the 1.5 to 1.3, so we're a little bit higher than 77 mills. If we drop them or we don't drop them and we bill at the full 95 mills and the full 1.5, we're not sure how we recoup those funds, because by the 20th, in statute, the treasurer has to submit any tax collections and any funding to the state of Montana. So we collect their money, we collect the school district money, we give the schools their money, and we hold their, for the most part, we hold the school district money, and they process their warrants and claims. We do their investments for them. They come through our account. The state money goes directly to the state of Montana by the 20th of next month. So we're not sure how, if the other counties were successful, how would we get those funds back to refund back to our taxpayers? There's been a couple different scenarios. One was our taxpayers would be out. The other scenario would be that we would be issuing somehow 22,000 rebates to cut to taxpayers, which would be a very big chore for a local government. Plus, you've seen the different transactions that take place in a 6-month time frame between who owned the property then and who paid the taxes and who bought it, and we get prorated tax bills that come through the treasurer's office on sales. So, you know, that would be a difficult scenario. Refunding back to the taxpayers would be a difficult scenario for us, but it would be an option if you choose to go down that path. And of course, if the other counties were successful, then we, of course, would go back to the state of Montana and request those refunds for our taxpayers if you went that way. The other way, again, is we would have to be put in a position to rebill if we lost a lawsuit against the state of Montana.
Thank you, Director Gleason. I'll just fill in just a little bit on that, because I asked that question directly. I said, you know, why, if we overbilled, why couldn't we just ask the state for them to refund it? And they said once it goes into the general fund, they have no obligation to give that back. I mean, out of the goodness of their heart, maybe they would say, oh yeah, we goofed up and here's your money back. But the tax attorneys that we worked with, they said that is very unlikely, and Butte-Silver Bowl could likely have to take on those costs of refunding that ourselves and finding that funding to be able to do that. So we're putting ourselves in a situation which we were made aware of that essentially this would bring lawsuits on by the taxpayers against us. And you know, there is no win situation in this. There really isn't. It's a really tough conversation to have to advocate one way or the other. But Commissioner Sorge and then Commissioner Shea, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I guess this is a question for County Attorney Joyce. You're talking about a lawsuit. I'm assuming this lawsuit is probably in district court somewhere, I'm assuming. And is this a lawsuit that's going to be drug on for years, or is it something that can be done quickly? You know, because then you're also talking about having to refund potentially dollars. So if it goes a long ways, is there going to have to be 2 years of refunds that we're going to have to do, or 3 years? So we're going to have to set some money aside just in case we do have to make refunds? You know, these are all questions I think that, so would it be something to be long drug out in your?
Commissioner Sorge, County Attorney Joyce.
I know it's really hard to say, but it's.
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Sorge, yes, the proper venue for the lawsuit would be in the district court. I think you probably know that the state of Montana has already sued Missoula County, and it's a declaratory judgment action, which essentially means they're asking the court to declare that they have the right to impose the 95 mills. So it's an interpretation of the statute, and I don't know whether it's just a jury trial or before a judge, you know, but it's a declaratory judgment action that is basically a legal question that a court is going to have to decide, and the state of Montana will have to decide which counties they want to sue, depending on how many counties make a decision not to levy the 95 mills. So I can't really answer to you directly how long it will take. And there's also the possibility that if you decide to remain with the 95 mills, that you may have some lawsuits from taxpayers.
Thank you, County Attorney Joyce. Commissioner Shea had a question, and then I'll go back to Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Bear with me, everybody, because I just have some thoughts. Chief Executive Gallagher made a statement that kind of made me giggle about the goodness of their hearts at the state level. So I just want to say, having the taxpayers pitted against public education is a dream scenario for that supermajority. They love this. They are chaos agents. They did this intentionally. They had opportunities to make things better, so it never got to this point, and they didn't, period. So let's remember why we're here, because they threw a honey badger into the middle of the works. That's why we're here. So let's try not to be angry with each other, and I would encourage the public education community, the taxpayers all to come together to understand that in the end, we're all in this together. Local government is the last functioning level of government that we have in this country, if you haven't noticed. We have to preserve that, and having this type of chaos thrown into the local government feels almost intentional to me. Maybe I'm paranoid, but I don't think so. Danette, could you please explain to me again that potential for those potential taxpayer rebates not coming from the state coffers, but coming from the local coffers?
Commissioner Shea, Director Gleason.
Yep, Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Shea, Commissioners. I had explained before too, and I know this is really complicated. It's complicated for us. Chief Executive Gallagher and myself are relying a lot on what we're learning through, and the county attorney learning through other entities as well as other tax lawyers, whatever, on how different things can function. And our concern is, like Chief Executive Gallagher had stated, that these funds go to the state general fund. And we were told that once they leave Butte-Silver coffers and hit those general funds, it becomes very difficult for local government to grab those monies and pull them back. So if we levy the 95 mills, there is potential. I believe it was Commissioner Sorch that might have mentioned about us having to reserve funds for potential rebates. You know, how does that work, or what does that look like? So, you know, I think you and I had spoke a little bit earlier about a discussion about, well, what if we levy the 95 mills, but we internally, through some motion or some action on this resolution, we hold that additional funding in a reserve fund here at the local government. We send on 77.95 or 9 mills, and then we hold those additional funding, and then, you know, wait to see what happens at the end. And, you know, I think that's even difficult too. You know, we alluded to, like, how do we invest the money? And, you know, we'd still have all those obligations to hold that money. And then once we had to return it, did we have the right return on investment to give back? You know, what does that scenario look like? So I think that part concerns me, holding the money and being the custodial of those funds if we levy the 95 mills and then holding that responsibility. I think our concern is that I think we're aware of several other large counties in the state that have already done this reduction. I think we were made aware, very much aware, that there's many, many other counties that are also going to go down this path. Whether they do it or not, it could be a different story. We're hearing anywhere from 50 more counties doing this. And so, you know, it's going to be a very complicated process. I just don't know on a local government if we're the right source to levy funds and hold funds and send 77, you know, each time, because every month we have tax collections. Every month, meaning throughout the whole fiscal year, because certain months are larger tax months, like November and December, but the Treasurer's Office collects taxes every month. And so, and then we'd have to looking at, was it tax year 12 or 15 or 19 that we're collecting versus tax year 23? And so there's a lot of complexity there of the local government trying to hold mills and then trying to just send enough over and then keeping it to determine what the courts are going to say before we remit those funds. I guess our biggest concern is, you know, we go forward with 95 mills, and then how do we get that rebate back, and what's going to be our obligation to our taxpayers, and are we going to be out the $1.8 million over 2 fiscal years to pay back that money? Because Evan had it right. It's $1.8 million in Silver Bow County for both fiscal years, so close to, you know, roughly $3.6 million over the next 2 years, and we would have to be rebating those funds back. And does that come out of our coffers once we remit the money to the state? So I don't know if
Thank you, Director Gleason. Follow up, Commissioner Shea.
Yes, Director Gleason, thank you for that explanation. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Patrick, if he would indulge me.
Commissioner Shea, Mr. Patrick.
Thank you. Because there isn't a single person up here that doesn't support public education. I mean, there just isn't. I don't think there's a single person in this room that doesn't support and value public education. So if tonight's resolution passes and the mills are levied at the lower rate. What is the immediate effect on the school district?
Commissioner Shea, Mr. Patrick.
The immediate effect, I guess, our budgets are set. You know, I can say that we'll probably be fine. I don't know what the funds look at the state level. I do know that they're talking about an $80 million shortfall for this year. If the state can't cover that or doesn't cover that, then that's revenue that we don't get, that we would have to go to our reserves to be able to fund the budget that we adopted. So, you know, hypothetically, if that $80 million can't come from the state to cover what we've budgeted, then yeah, we'll have a shortfall and have to dip into our reserves.
Mr. Patrick, okay. Commissioner Shea, follow up.
Thank you. My understanding, and either you or Director Gleason can correct me if I'm wrong, the state's already obligated to fund you this year. And so if there's a shortfall, they have the obligation to find the money on their end. It would have nothing to do with any action that we would or wouldn't take tonight. Is that correct or incorrect?
Commissioner Shea, Mr. Patrick.
Yeah, it's my understanding that they do have that obligation to fund the school districts. I think doing some research, I can't remember if it was back in 2013 or a previous year where there was a shortfall in revenue and school districts were asked to, basically they didn't get some of their funding from the state, and what they had to do was dip into their reserves or cut some expenses. So I can't speak for the state, but I do know that the difference between the 95 and the 77 mills is $80 million, so.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Commissioner Shea, follow up.
Thank you. There might be more than one person in here that would have some institutional knowledge about that scenario, but I think one of the people would be Mr. Barrett. Do you have any input on the last time maybe that the schools were asked due to a state budget shortfall to dip into their reserves? Do you have any input? And if you don't, that's fine too. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Commissioner Shea, Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Shea, I can't speak to the specifics of that. I think something worth noting is that this is a legal issue. You're talking about dollars and cents here and choices that will affect how much you're going to have in and out at this particular time. But this has gone to court. The administration has gone to court against one county and has indicated verbally that they're going to bring it against all the counties if they reduce their millage, flex it down. So this is going to go before district court, and it's very unlikely that it would stay there. It's likely that whoever loses that is going to go to the Supreme Court. So we're going to have a Supreme Court decision. Now, I can say the last time this happened was relative to the equalization money, which is what this money goes into. This money that comes from the county here, there's 95 mills. You know, that's used to meet the constitutional obligation for an equal and quality education for all students in Montana. So counties that have no tax base end up sending what they can in 95 mills, and counties that have a gigantic tax base send their 95 mills in. And then that's put into a pot together and redistributed out. So for example, when we were told that the county here, the school district here, the 95 mills, 90% comes back. That means 10% of the money we send in to the state goes to other counties to help them educate students at an equal level. So equalization is a major thing in the Montana Constitution. Back in the late 90s, there was a lawsuit about equalization and how it was going to be applied. And that was resolved. It took quite a few years, and it was resolved in late 2004 and early 2005. That happened to be just when I was in the administration went with Governor Schweitzer. And what had to happen is they resolved the situation, and there was a special session called. In the special session, one day, one bill, resolve and satisfy the requirements of the settlement on equalization. That idea of right now, there was a suggestion that a special session be called to take the simple, clean, clear approach of a rate reduction, which would have got us out of this whole mess. There was a refusal to do the special session. Now, if you look at the mess we're in right now, it'd be very hard to predict what will happen 1 year from now or 2 years from now, because look how complicated it seems to all of us right now. And I personally think that the chaos in the property tax situation right now, I think it was deliberately done. And it goes in line with the destruction of the income tax system in Montana. In Montana, we used to have 9 brackets of income tax. It was progressive. And the people in the higher brackets paid higher rates. You know how many rates we have, how many brackets we have in Montana right now? We have 2. Elon Musk, if he was a Montana citizen, would pay income tax at the rate of a family that makes $29,000 a year. They've broken the income tax system. They're trying to break the property tax system. And I think their solution is to say, in all this mess, we just have to have a sales tax. So look forward, folks, for the real mess. I'm not sure it'll resolve itself easily, but there is always the possibility there may be some clarity in the legal judgment. Right now, the judgment is only about the 95 mills. Do you have to levy all 95 or less? That can be resolved, but the rest of the mess has to be resolved either by doing rates, trying to go back. It's like trying to put toothpaste back in a tube. It's not, it's looking a little dicey right now when you look to the future. But I would, if you wouldn't mind, just one more thing. It's important for you to know that your legislators in Butte did not have a choice given to them to lower the rates. There was no vote set up to say, do you want to have the rates lowered or not? This was done by the budget office of the administration. They cooked this up, they baked it into the cake, into the budget. They anticipated this happening. They chose not to lower the rates. They chose to take the $181 million a year from the 95 mills to $160 million over the 2 years and put that into their budget. And so there was no choice given to the legislators to vote on this thing. It was all cooked up at the administration and the budget office and the building of the governor's budget, and we're all having to live with that. I wonder if they might think it's a mistake now, but we're having to live with it. It is very complex, and hopefully simplicity can come to the fore. If we could somehow restore this rate thing, if 2 years from now they restored the lower rates, the tax shift away from where corporations got a break, because you did, as Danette said, you not only lowered the mills they required you to lower, you lowered them even further. But what that does do is it gives a big break to industry. And if they go back to the rate thing, maybe parity will come back the way it was before. How, that's going to be hard to do. But you asked me about a little bit of history. That's my reflection on it. It's going to be legally resolved, but the legal resolution is going to deal only with the 95 mil issue. It's not going to deal with the rate issue. That's strictly a legislative issue, and you'll have to be, all of us, looking at that very closely 2 years hence.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Yeah, last follow-up with Commissioner Shea, and then we'll go to Commissioner Sorich.
And that,
I will
folks,
give you
is
yours,
why
Commissioner Thatcher, as well.
you should vote. This is why voting matters. Because when we have a legislature like the one we have right now, these are the messes we get into. So that's why voting matters. That's the end of my soapbox.
And just to add to that, just a piece of my narrative to this. This is on the backs of property owners, residential property owners that are mostly affected here. That's where we're feeling the heat here. And so it's pitted us making a decision about property taxes, and makes it so that we're having to have a debate against our schools about how they're going to be funded. And I'm fearful that retribution is going to be taken onto the schools as we move forward. I believe by statute they have to. I truly believe the information we're getting, they have to fund the schools. But moving forward, there could be some retribution at the legislative level that will affect them moving forward. I'm fearful of that as well, and that does not escape us here when these decisions are made. So, Commissioner Sorge, Commissioner Reardon, and then back to Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'm trying to put my thoughts together so it means something. You know, I guess in my mind, this is something that's not going to be resolved today, tomorrow, next week, week after. You know, so it's going to be, and it's, the school district is being held hostage in between the middle of it. You know, I'm all for the school district. Obviously, that's, you know, that's my employer right now. So I want to make sure the schools are funded. But again, I believe they're being held hostage right in the middle of it. But I also want to make sure that the taxpayers are the ones that I want to work for. You know, we've sat here and heard, like Director Gleason said, there's some lady in tears said she's lived in a house for 30 years. She can't afford to move. She can't afford to do it. She can't afford her taxes. So I guess I'm going to vote yes for this. I guess I would rather be on the side of the taxpayers, the ones that fund it, and then, you know, take our chances, because I believe it's going to be years down the road before we ever see resolution to this.
Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner Sorge. Commissioner Reardon.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. First of all, I would like to thank you and Danette for your effort in handling the situation. When we started talking about this, Danette Gleason got up there, and I thought that we did do a real good job with the budget this year, considering the taxpayers. And as Commissioner Fisher said, and Sorge and everybody around here, we represent the taxpayers. That's the number one deal. And the number two is basically the education of the children here. I don't think there's ever been a mill levy regarding the public schools in Butte, Montana, whether it was for $30 million or $3 that's been turned down by the voters. So I think, my personal feeling is, I think the commission has done their job. I think the budget director, the chief executive, and all people involved here have done the job and their due diligence. And I'm with Commissioner Fisher. Basically, I'd rather get sued by the carpetbaggers than I would the citizens of Butte. So I'm going to vote definitely yes on this deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reardon. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Yes, somewhat echoing everyone's sentiments. Kevin, I would hate to be in your position. I'd hate to be in Director Gleason's position. I frankly hate being in my position right now. But I think it's important that, you know, you mentioned your GTB and the equalization, and Evan mentioned it. And from what I understand, the reason we get 90% probably is because we're lower income compared to Missoula, Bozeman, those I guess richer, I guess you would call it, communities. So I think it's important that we take a look that if this does not affect school districts this year, our school district this year and next, that we also have to consider that taxpayers live still in this low income place. Many of them, as Director Gleason said, are on, you know, tight budgets, set fixed incomes, all of it. And so I think that, you know, as we go to vote on this tonight, we need to consider our taxpayers, as I'm sure all of us will. And then your point about it'll have to go back to the voters if we do see a decrease, and then we need that increase. Similar to Commissioner Reardon, I would bet on our local taxpayers. We historically, Butte-Silver funds public education pretty well, at least in the last few bond issues that I've been a part of. And I would urge, I guess, other people here tonight that we consider our local taxpayers in the sense that our local school district, as Mr. Patrick stated, will not be affected within this year or next. So with that, I actually would like to make a motion to I guess send it final reading. Would that be placed on file?
Concur and place on file.
Place it on final reading and passed.
Deemed,
Having
having been deemed fully
deemed
read.
it.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to place resolution number 2023-55 on final reading, deemed having been fully read at length and passed, having been fully read at length.
We have a motion and a second to place resolution number 2023-55 on final reading, deemed fully read and passed. Is there anything else on the question? Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you. I know that we work for our constituents and our local taxpayers, but I mean, I really think that we're still forgetting in that 2 years from now to 2025 what's really going to happen. I'd hate to be in a situation with a long-term effect if something does come about and we do have to come to it. I know that, you know, we talk about our local taxpayer always passes every mill and does everything for our school districts, but I mean, we really have to think about what the long-term effect's going to be in 2025. Commissioner Thatcher brought up, you know, the base of the economy of a county, and due to that, you know, with the 90 and the 10 that Mr. Evan Barrett brought up, is that going to affect us, seeing that we aren't so rich, as Commissioner Thatcher said? Why other ones are not going to be affected as much as we are, and that we will have to take a hit from the tax base in 2025? We don't know this, as Commissioner Fisher's always said. You know, we don't have a crystal ball, but those are things that we all worry about up here, and I think that we still have to worry about now to understand that fact. Kevin and Danette have done an excellent job of sharing this, but it just, all the information that they can, and like you said, we are put in a bad position, but I really think about the taxpayers in 2025, how this is going to affect them moving forward with this. Do I want to be sued by either? No, I don't know better or what, like you're talking about, you jump on board with it or not, but I really think that we have to look about, does that affect it, the economy of our county, affect us differently than from Gallatin Valley or Lake County or Yellowstone County? It just seems like with these DTB dollars, you know, if we don't have this aid, it's going to fall on our tax base in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mankins. I'd like to add, I don't have a crystal ball either, but I can almost look without having a crystal ball and say, this is going to be an issue at the legislature no matter what position you take today. This is going to be a fight no matter what. I think the 95 mills is going to be taken up. I think the school funding is going to be taken up. And I think that, as Commissioner Shea said, voting matters, and being involved matters. I don't think, and Mr. Barrett is you know, a constitutional expert, and I bet you know, dimes to dollars, he would say that we're going to see a fight over school funding at the next legislative session, no matter what position you take today. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I just want to make a couple comments. I'm all for this resolution passing. You know, I trust our district courts. I trust our Supreme Court. And I think as long as we got them deciding this issue, I think we've got a good chance of coming out on the better half of a bad situation. I'd just like to make a comment, though, and probably don't have a lot to do with this, but valuation of property is a big thing. And these could be misquotes or none, but the valuation of like the Walmart property in Butte, I believe it went down like $4 or $5 million in valuation, from like 6 million to 1 million. Town Pump, Lescavars, all them people out there, they all dropped $200,000 or $300,000 in valuation of property. A poor woman that lives out near there in a very inexpensive house, her valuation went up $20,000. Is this right? Is this what corporate America is going to do to us in local communities? We've got to start standing up and voting and doing as Commissioner Shea said. I mean, when you have corporate America dropping Walmart $5 million valuation in Butte-Silver Bow, and then you raise a person's taxes like any of our sitting at this table, I know, raises a couple $100 in taxes. That's not right. We got to start being more attentive and look at this. So this resolution, I think, is our best route to go, and let the Montana State Supreme Court handle it. Thank you.
Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. I just got one question. I don't want to tie us up. We've been here long enough. If this happened to drag out for 2 or 3 years prior to answer to who's right and who's wrong, so if we vote and cut the taxes, cut the mills, and we don't collect those taxes, would the property owner get stuck with that big chunk for 3 years worth, catch up all in one shot?
Commissioner Callahan, Director Gleason. I don't know if you have that answer.
So, Chief Executive Gallagher, Commissioner Callahan, Commissioners, I think I'm going to just restate this. So you're asking me that, so every year you're going to have to look at this. So next year, this resolution is going to come before you again, and you're going to make the decision next year. Hopefully we'll have way more information before this time next year when you're trying to decide whether you're levying 95 mills or 77.9 or whatever it calculates to be. Hopefully you're going to have that. You're going to have better information before you. So each year you pass this resolution, independent. So just on this change here, if it came back and we would have to come up with a difference, then we would have to, yes, we would have to bill the taxpayer for that. So hopefully, and I think this courts are going to understand the pressure to help I mean, right, for the most part, a lot of them are elected people too, dependent upon where it ends up in the courts. They're going to want to get to resolve this too, because it's a pretty difficult situation across the whole state of Montana. So I think you would be out 1 year of trying to decide, and so there's a possibility that sometime in, if we can't get this resolved and no court cases resolved before May of next year, or even like March of next year, and we have to send out a new tax bill, and then potentially, yes, next fall, we could be trying to make up a difference there. I'm not sure how the courts would rule on how we would implement catching up these mills.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Gleason. All right. Okay. We've called for the vote. So commissioners, please vote. And would anyone like to change their vote? Clerk, please record the vote.
8 yea, 2 nay.
8 yea, 2 nay, motion passes. And pray for all of us as we go forward on this. And all right, moving forward, please note the calendar and other meeting events that are coming up. Next, we'll take any public comment on any item not on the agenda tonight. If you'd like to come speak on any item that was not on the agenda tonight, state your name, address, and what you'd like to speak of. Seeing none, I would take a motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signal by aye. Opposed? Motion passes.